Photography snobs and elitists, they come in many forms, all of them very unpleasant. And today I'm going to go through a few that you might encounter as you navigate through your photography journey. And I'm also going to go through the curious fact as to why you won't find elitism or snobbery in mobile photography amongst mobile photographers. And I also need your help because I'm at a crossroad with my editing app of choice. Hey, I'm David Addison and welcome to episode 3 of the David Addison Show. So I got some great feedback from episode 2, which was my interview with Ben Sandowski, the developer or one of the developers of Halide. And my favourite comment came from Mike at Smartphone Photography Training. He said, "That was just fantastic. Thank you, Ben, for the thorough lesson. David, awesome, mate. That is the only YouTube video that I can recall that I have ever watched twice." And that's a long YouTube video. Is it like an hour long? So thank you so much, Mike, there, watching for 2 hours of my interview with Ben Sandowski. I really enjoyed it. I really learned a lot, and it's really added to my appreciation of what like these app developers do, especially indie developers, because these guys, they're not a corporation, you know, they're just 3 people, and this is often the case with mobile photography app developers. They're just 1 person, 2, 3 people, and they often have like full-time jobs. Like their app, their photo app is like a passion project. So just like bear that in mind. I know you, if you're listening to this, you're probably cool, but when I go on like camera app reviews and comments, I often see some really unreasonable, unfair reviews and comments. People rating and reviewing without even having bought the app. So this to me is this is a big no-no. And I wish like these people just would like think in their minds, like, would I say this if I wasn't hiding behind an avatar and a username and a keyboard? Would I say this face to face? Probably not. So that's what I have to say about that. I went off on a little tangent there. Anyway, let's get to my editing app situation. So as you may know, if you follow me on YouTube or on Instagram, I'm a Darkroom user. I've been using Darkroom since full-time since November 2020. I first used it in June of 2020, and I've been using Darkroom and Lightroom like simultaneously because as much as I like Darkroom, like I really like how the edits look. I like the simplicity of it. I like how, again, it's an indie developer, just a team of I think 3 or 4 people, something like that. And there's something about like escaping from the Adobe, under the Adobe thumb, if that makes sense, from under the Adobe thumb. So Darkroom has always been very appealing to me, but it's not perfect. You know, there are some features that I need that Darkroom doesn't give me, such as the healing brush, which I use for my commercial work. Very, very useful. I use that a lot. And it can't bracket. It can't do HDR merging. So I do a lot of bracketing. iPhone files are noisy, and I bracket in even longer, the longer exposure app as well, which I can't do in Darkroom. So I've been forced to keep Lightroom around. Now I've tried to bracket in Affinity Photo. It just didn't work. I really didn't like the results whatsoever. Lightroom has just got it nailed 100%. So Lightroom has to stay. But I've been having some issues recently with Darkroom, and that's made me really, it's given me a problem. So I'll go through them. So the first is syncing. Now, when I shoot with Lightroom, my photos are automatically adding to Lightroom as I'm shooting, and they're being pushed up to Adobe servers and pushed down to my other devices. So when I get home, my photos are all here waiting for me, and any edits that I make when I'm out shooting, they're just there and they sync so fast. It's such a nice experience, and Lightroom Classic syncs with Lightroom Mobile. Fantastic. But in Darkroom, you can sync kind of. You export your edits that you've made on one device, and then, or you export the photo, excuse me, and then they get pushed to your other devices through iCloud, and Darkroom sort of retrieves the edits on your other devices. But this isn't like, it's not a smooth process sometimes. Sometimes it happens great, it works really well, but then other times it just doesn't happen. And so what I'll do is I'll start editing on my phone, and I'll leave the phone. Maybe it'll need to charge, maybe I want to use my Mac or whatever. For whatever reason, I want to use a different device. I go over to that different device, my edits haven't synced, and I'm like, oh, okay, I haven't exported the photos. Go back to the phone, export them, then wait, because Darkroom's at the mercy of iCloud, and especially if like the phone decides it wants to save battery by not syncing, then it's not going to do it. So I go on my phone and I force it, no, you must upload these pictures to iCloud right now. And it doesn't do it if, say, I'm backing up to Backblaze at the same time, or there's a lot of devices on the Wi-Fi network. It's just going to take ages, especially as I am bracketing. I'm taking a lot of photos, and I often come back with like 100, at least 100 every shoot. So this can be, sometimes I don't get to my photos till the next day because it can take that long, So I don't like this experience, but it's been fine. It's been okay. I am willing to sort of overlook it, but there are other things happening. So the next one is bugs and errors and crashes and things like that. Now, I've been a Darkroom user since what did I say, May or June of 2020. It's now September of 2021, and this thing is still crashing frequently on any device that I use. It's still buggy. It still has errors that I think should have been ironed out by now. I mean, Darkroom's been around a lot longer than the length of time I've been using it. And for me, it should these issues should have been ironed out. But they haven't been, and it's just like, I don't want to sit here editing. I've got stuff to do. I've got YouTube videos to edit, scripts to write, A-roll to film, B-roll to film. And I'm taking pictures literally these days just for my business and to promote awareness of my YouTube channel. That's it. So I'm not finding enjoyment in editing. And even if I was just doing it for pleasure, I don't want to keep having to relaunch the app, every however many times it crashes. So there's that, and there's one final thing. Now, I'm willing to overlook all these things because I do love Darkroom. I love how the edits look in particular. I love the simplicity of it, and I'm willing to let all this go because this has been happening since the beginning. But there's one final thing, and that is how raw files don't render properly. Now, I first came upon this in February. I edited some photos. I went back to them and they look different. They look darker. And these are DNG files from my iPhone. So I'm like, okay, this is weird. I'll just forget about it and move on. But then it happened again, like recently, and I'm like, okay, this is not acceptable because basically what's happening is the highlights look okay, but the shadows don't. And I contacted the Darkroom team about this, and they said, yeah, in version 5.6 of Darkroom, the raw files weren't rendering accurately. When you come back to them later, they're rendered accurately. So the shadows look darker. They were being, what did they say? They were like biased or doing some sort of bias or something. And I'm like, this, so I'm supposed to import my photos into Darkroom, or they import automatically. I'm supposed to not edit them and wait for them to render correctly, but they wouldn't render correctly until I edited and exported them. It was only when I came back to them that they changed in their appearance. So I'm supposed to edit my pictures, export them, and then come back to them, wait for them to change, and then re-edit them all again. Like, really? I don't think so. Right? This is just, it's not a nice experience, So I'm like, I don't want to be paying, plus there's the money side of things. I don't want to be, look, I do this just by myself. I'm in a box room here. I'm by myself. AdSense is just in the dump whatsoever, I'm paying for 2 editing apps simultaneously, which I don't want to do. So I'm like, I want to support the indie developer. I really, really do. But, you know, I'm going to go back to Lightroom full time. Because this issue of the dark raw files and stuff, it's just meh. Okay. It's not for me. So I went back to Lightroom, and I really don't like how the edits look. I really don't like how I have duplicate libraries now. So I import into Lightroom, then I export, and I've got 2 versions of the photo. I've got the export and the DNG. I delete from Lightroom, they don't delete from iCloud Drive, and the other way around. And I'm getting so mixed and matched, and I'm so confused with my two photo libraries. And I'm just like, this does not fit with how I like to work. I like everything to be simple and streamlined. So I'm like, I'm editing my photo in Darkroom, and then I'm editing it in Lightroom, trying to match the Darkroom edits. And I'm just like, this is not working for me. One of these two will maybe not have to go, but I'm at a loss at the moment. I don't know what to do, so I thought I would ask you guys, like, what would you do in my situation? What do you do with your photos and stuff like that? I'm after any sort of help that I can get. So that's my dilemma. Now, onto the main topic of this podcast, episode 3, which is photography, snobbery, and elitism. Now, I've encountered a few insecure photographers in my time. I've encountered a few snobs and elitists, and I'll go through a few different kinds of elitists and snobs that you may encounter, and why you won't find them in mobile photography. So I've got my list here that I made of different types of snobs and elitists. So up first, we have the type of person who will disregard photographers and try to bring them down with comments like this. Well, if I had that camera, I could take pictures like that, right? Or she's only taking pictures like that because she uses a fancy camera. If I was in that location, I could have got that shot. If I was using that lens, if I was shooting that model, that picture only looks good because the model's beautiful. If I had that lighting, you get the idea. It's just constantly trying to disregard the photographer's skill and things like that. And I see these sort of comments the most on a photographer called Irene Rudnick's YouTube videos and photos. If you don't know Irene Rudnick, she's a portrait photographer, mainly uses natural light, and she takes these stunning portraits, like really, really nice in natural light. She's often in a stunning location with a beautiful model, and yes, she uses a Canon R5. She used to use a Canon 5D Mark III, and she's always had, like, as long as I've been watching her anyway, she's had this really expensive glass, like 85 1.2, 50mm 1.2, very, very expensive setup, right? And she's getting these types of comments. Well, she's only taking pictures that are this good because she's using the R5, she's using this 1.2 because of the models, because of the locations. I'm like, this is really like a complete logical fallacy, making these sorts of comments. Like, why would she go to an ugly location with poor lighting to make photos? Like, she's chosen to go to a nice location in golden hour, like that's some sort of crutch or something. Why would she purposely choose a bad location, like to prove a point to you? Really? Like, so there's that. And yeah, like, quality gear does help, especially lenses, especially glass. But they can't make the great photos for you. She's had to arrange the shoot, find the location, arrange the model, pose the model, get the settings and things like that. And she also makes videos with entry-level gear as well, with like a cheap 50mm 1.8, those sort of lenses, and her results look, if not the same, like pretty darn similar. So it really doesn't make sense. Like people who make these sort of comments, they're clearly insecure. They're probably jealous. They probably get any less comments and less likes than they think that they deserve. So That's our first type of elitist there. Next, we have the gear snob. So these often go hand in hand with the brand snob and the make and model snob, if you like. And they're the people who think they're superior because they use like a certain kind of gear, and they'll judge what level of photographer you are and determine how to treat you based on what gear that you use. They'll have a pro or like a high-end setup, and they want you to know about it. Like, trust me, that red Canon ring, that red L series Canon ring, that can't shine bright enough for these people. It's like it's very, very obvious. It's like a beacon. They want it to be like a beacon. They'll wave it in front of your face just so you know. Oh, have you got an L series lens? I didn't notice. You know. So, where am I up to here? So, so judging a photographer and their photography on their gear, it's an ad hominem. In a debate, an ad hominem is where you argue against the person rather than their argument. So you don't argue against the merit of the point. You dismiss the point based on who that person is. And that's exactly what these gear snobs are doing. So they're like, oh, you've not got a 1DX Mark III? Well, your photography clearly sucks. Or, well, you've not got a Hasselblad? Well, you're clearly not a pro then, are you? You know, stuff like that. And this is quite interesting, because while that's a complete fallacy, like with the first type of elitist, gear does have an effect on your perception of a photographer and of a photograph, I think, in a non-snobbish way. Let me know what you think. For example, like I think you're likely to be less critical and more complimentary if a photo was taken on a phone, you know, because phones are considered as, still to this day, phones are considered like lesser. You know, they are the lesser, regardless of what's objectively true. People's perception is that phones are lesser. So when they see the phone picture, they're more likely to be complimentary. And this is weird. I'm struggling with this. When someone is primarily a phone photographer, they'll have it in their bio on Instagram, primarily taken with phones. And I'm the same. I've got my Instagram bio says 99% of these pictures were taken on a phone. And I'm like, why am I telling you this? Why do people tell other people this? I've got two things in mind. The first one, I'm not having a go at anyone here. I'm just genuinely trying to know. The first one is, are you expecting more praise because you think that photos shouldn't be this good with a phone? So you're expecting higher praise? Or is it like a preemptive defense of any criticism? Are you saying, like, please don't be too harsh on me because these photos were only taken with a phone? You know? Otherwise, like, why include it in your bio? Like, and I'm in this camp too. I have it in my bio myself, and I'm trying to work this out. Why is it there? I don't know why. I want people to know that these pictures are taken with a phone. Like, people don't put taken with a DSLR, do they? Sometimes they will put taken with entry-level DSLR, whatever name that is. They'll say all pictures taken with a Canon 100D or Canon 350D, some of the old DSLR. You know, they'll have that in. Again, maybe for one of those two reasons. I don't know. What do you think? So, like, I wonder what would happen if you shared a photo with the iPhone, with the caption, like, taken with an iPhone, and then shared the same photo with the caption taken with a Hasselblad or something like that. You know, what would the reactions be? Maybe I can arrange to have this, to try this experiment at some point. And this ties into something interesting that happened with me over the past 2 years. So back in 2017, 2018, when Peter McKinnon, everyone knows Peter McKinnon, it was just him and his DSLR. He had a Canon 1DX Mark II, and he was just running and gunning, right? And I was glued to his channel. He was making like these amazing quality videos with the amazing quality B-roll, just by himself, just a guy and his camera. And it was so inspiring. It was like, wow, this guy's just like me. I can do that because I can be just a guy with a camera as well, you know? So I was glued to his channel. I was subscribed. I didn't want to miss a video. But then he got bigger, and now that he's got like a crew around him, it's not the same. For me, anyway, it's just not the same. It's like, okay, now I'm just like watching any other film crew. Like you expect this level from a crew of people. So it's like I can't relate to this whatsoever. I'm not begrudging him success by any stretch of the imagination. I'm not trying to be one of the elitists or snobberists snobs that I'm trying to bring down. But trust me, as soon as I'm at that level, I'm gonna be out of this room. I'm gonna have someone checking my audio levels for me and stuff like that. Like, I'm not begrudging him success whatsoever. It's just interesting how my perception has sort of changed based on the gear. Like, as his situations got better, I'm less impressed by what he's doing. In fact, I'm not just less impressed, I'm not interested whatsoever, you know? So that's just me. I watch YouTube to learn and to be inspired and stuff, and, you know. Anyway, let's go on to the next elitist. This is the subset of the gear elitist. This is the no idea gear elitist. So this is the person who has all the gear but also has no idea. And this is the gear elitist who takes his landscape photos with a flash. For example, a very expensive flash, mind you, so maybe it can replicate the sun, I don't know, but yeah, they're taking landscape pictures in the middle of the day with a flash. And this example is drawn from my real life experience. The funniest no idea gear elitist, no idea gear, no idea gear elitist. The funniest no idea gear elitist that I've ever encountered was a guy who I was using, it was 2012, I was using a Nikon D80 or a D90 at the time, and he made some comment to me about how he had a real camera. Right? From what I could, again, it had the Canon Red Ring or something like that. 2012, it could have been a 5D Mark III, 5D Mark II, something like that. And he was shooting with his speed light, no lie, he was shooting with his speed light in the middle of the day, pointing up to the sky, as he was taking a picture of somebody, a person. So, like, he was trying to bounce his flash off a cloud or something. Really? Yeah, so he had the gear, but he clearly had no idea. So I had a chuckle about that. Still chuckling about it now. So next, we have the JPEG elitist. This is the person who will tell you that they shoot in JPEG because they get it right in the camera. Which really infers that people who shoot in RAW do so because they cannot indeed get it right in the camera as the JPEG elitist can, clearly. And this is just nonsense. This makes very, very little sense. So JPEGs aren't just RAW files that you can't edit as much. They're edited in the camera itself when captured. So, like, hence a lot of beginners, they start out by shooting JPEG because they look more complete, more finished than RAW files do. And yes, when you're shooting JPEG, you have to make doubly sure your exposure is optimal, because if you blow those highlights, like, there's a lot less chance of you getting them back and things like that. But that doesn't mean people who shoot in RAW do so because they have no idea how to set their exposure, and they're just walking around like their whole careers apparently blowing out highlights and bringing them back in RAW because they don't know how to expose for them. You know, it doesn't make sense. So, like, a lot of RAW shooters, they shoot in RAW because they like the quality of the RAW file, and editing is part of the photography process. Okay, but do not tell that to our next elitist, who is the editing elitist, more commonly known as the purist, who disregards any photo that's been edited whatsoever, and they think that editing of any kind whatsoever is some sort of cheating, that it's wrong. You know, Ansel Adams would not use Lightroom. Ansel Adams, wow, all this business. Back in the day, they didn't do this. Like, really? Seriously? Yes, they did. Yes, they did. They actually had to, they were forced to edit. Otherwise, if you didn't edit, you were left with negatives. Like, Ansel Adams was a pioneer of editing techniques, so particularly dodging and burning and zonal, things like that, in a darkroom. So he didn't use Lightroom. He used an original actual darkroom to edit his photos, of which he was a pioneer. So do not listen to anyone who says editing is like a modern technique, it's like a crutch, they didn't do it back in the day, they were real photographers back in the day. Like, get lost, dude. So the little brother to the editing elitist is the Preset Snob, and this is the elitist who thinks that every single photograph should be edited by scratch from the beginning. And again, presets are cheating, presets are lazy, or they're wrong for whatever reason. And like, yeah, I think some people, they do covet presets and they do want to use presets for maybe the wrong reasons. They expect too much from a preset or something like that. I don't know. But they're not cheating. Like, what are we competing for? How are they cheating? Like, presets are just workflow for me anyway. Like, you think I'm gonna like sit here for hours when my preset, which I made myself, by the way, can get the same amount of work done, like, or at least 90% of the work done in a fraction of the time. You think I'm gonna not do that and edit from scratch just because you think something? Like, get out of it. Get out of here. Like, no, I don't think so. So that's my list, but there's definitely more. Comment below any elitists you've encountered, any elitists that I've missed out and stuff like that. So one quick story before I move on to why you won't find elitists in mobile photography. I was working on a cruise ship as a photographer, and you often came across elitists on cruise ships, different kinds of elitists. They'd be like, they would walk over to you and they would be like, yeah, but I'm a photographer as well. I'm like, oh yeah, right, yeah. What do you shoot? Oh, big camera. I've got a big one. Yeah, one of the big ones, definitely. I'm like, oh, okay. What lens are you using? Big one. One of the big ones. Yep. Got a flash? Big one. You know, just like, okay, fine. So you had gear elitists and stuff, and you have brand elitists. What are you shooting with? Nikon. Ugh, not having my picture taken with a Nikon. Like, get stuffed, man. So this one guy, he came over to the photography department. We're all there. We're clearly, photography department, big, dead obvious. And he comes over to tell us specifically that he does not want his photo taken by the photography department specifically because that he is a photographer. Huh? Like, so I'm just like, okay, no worries whatsoever, dude. I'm really chilled out. I'm just laid back, you know. I'm just like, yeah, fine. So you have an interest in photography then? Do you want to maybe talk about photography? Do you want me to take you around the ship, show you the best angles, like the best views, the best times to go out shooting? And he's like, no. I just came over to tell you that I don't want a picture taking because I'm a photographer. I'm just like, this is so odd. What is happening? It really doesn't make sense. So anyway, so where was I saying? So that was it. Photography snobs, they all seem to have like the same thing in common. They just have to let you know their opinion. They just can't keep it to themselves and just be like, oh, that's not for me, and just move on. They have to comment. again, probably hiding behind their avatar and their username and their keyboard, probably would not say it to your face. So they say it on the Facebook and the forums and whatever. And it's like, oh, this person uses presets. I must inform them that I disapprove. And what, the other person is supposed to be like, oh, Bob doesn't like that I use presets. I'm going to have to change my entire workflow because some rando on an internet forum doesn't like the fact that I use... Get on your bike. Seriously? So why don't you find snobbery and elitism amongst mobile photographers and photography? Well, it is a huge part of like the mobile phone scene in general. You know, whenever a new iPhone comes out, it's like, oh, look at our brand new iPhone. And then Android people are like, well, we've had those features for 10 years. So it's big amongst those sort of people, but you don't get it amongst those people who take their smartphone photography seriously. And their phone has become their primary camera. So you don't get that sort of elitism across any of the brands or anything like that. So why is this? Well, let's start with gear elitism. Like, as smartphone photographers, we are already at the bottom of the gear elitist totem pole. Like, whatever the reality is, however good like phones are getting, like, they're still phones, and they're still widely not considered as like a serious photography tool. Like, you rock up to a shoot with a phone and you're going to get funny looks, you know, from photographers and non-photographers alike, you know, whereas you rock up to a shoot with any sort of DSLR, any sort of milk, and it belongs. Phones still don't, regardless of whether or not that's warranted or not. That's just how it is. And that's largely like thanks to how widely used that they are across the whole population. Whether you're a photographer or not, you've got a phone. And again, whether you're a photographer or not, you use your phone to take photos. So you could be standing there, whether you're an elitist or not, you're standing there with your iPhone 13 Pro Max, and then little Susie comes up next to you and takes out, she's an 8-year-old girl, she's got an iPhone 13 Pro Max, you know. So there's no grandeur statement to be made with any sort of phone. So the gear snobs and the gear elitists are out straight away. And like, you know, there's nothing exclusive about these devices. So because of this, people who use a phone for their photography over like a DSLR or a mirrorless camera, they naturally have much smaller egos. Like, there's, as I said, there's zero statement, there's zero grandeur to be made with a phone. So when you take photos with it, people have no idea whether you're a photographer or not. There's no like red ring to signal I am pro, you know. So as I said, gear elitism is just out straight away. In fact, it's not only out, you get the opposite. You know, when you see someone with that, if you're a smartphone, again, amongst smartphone photographers, if you see a photographer with an iPhone 5S, or if you see a picture was taken with a 5S, instead of looking down at it, going, oh, well, that's no good because it was taken with a 5S, the same way a gear elitist would, you're more impressed by that person. You're like, wow, dude, you're using a 5S? That's respect, you know? Or wow, you took it with a 5S, you must be pretty good. Whereas the opposite is true in traditional photography. It's like, what? Canon 200D? Psh, get out, don't waste my time. You know, you're clearly not a pro or something like that. So the opposite is actually true amongst mobile photographers. And like, even amongst like brands, even amongst like iPhone and Android and stuff like that, like, oh, Apple better than Android, iPhone, you know, Android has has more lenses built in, it's got better capabilities within the stock camera, whereas iPhone has better apps, better integration with hardware and software, stuff like that. There's still nothing like that. Because, like, as I said, egos just amongst mobile photographers are just naturally lower, because we're still very much in like a niche minority community, if you like. So when phone photographers encounter one another, there's like a kinship there. It's like you could be using a DSLR for this photography, but you're not. You're using a phone, and it doesn't matter what brand it is, whether I would use the brand or not. You're using a phone. Respect, there's like a certain level of respect just there mutually, just from the fact that you're using a phone instead of a DSLR or a milk. So there's that. Now, of course, like, you do get banter between people. Like, as I said, iPhone has better apps, Android has better lenses, blah blah blah. But this is just good fun. This is like when mobile photographers like get together, it's all about the photography at the end of the day. And people think it's cool what the other phone can do. It's like, you have those apps on iPhone? Wow, I wish we had those apps. And iPhone users are like, but you have this built-in capability? I wish we had that. It's not we're better than you because we've got that, or vice versa. The other way is true. This makes perfect sense. So people just want to learn from each other. Like, people want to help each other, and I like that. Usually in these photography groups, photography forums, they are just measuring contests, and they are just which is better, Nikon 750D, or it's like, oh my god, this is I would rather chew on tinfoil than be in this photography group. Whereas I don't have that amongst the mobile photography people. And so I am part of one Facebook group. I did have my own Facebook photography group, but I deleted it just because I don't like Facebook. I don't like Lizard Man himself, King Lizard, the Zuck. I don't like anything that company stands for, so I did not want to host a platform on it. So I am part of Shane Mostyn's Facebook group, the Bloody Legends Facebook group. I go under a pseudonym of Pisikuts Frumwas, which means beautiful cat in Romanian. So you can find me on there as Pisikuts Frumwas. And I do intend to comment more and be active on it more, but I'm still in that mindset of I hate Facebook, so I don't like going on it as much. But I need to go on it more because it is a really cool place. If you are a mobile photographer and you're not on there, I would highly recommend that you get on there. And everyone who I've encountered so far has just been a really cool person. You know what's great as well about mobile photography is that the developers often are part of the community, especially the smaller indie developers. I've had so many developers reach out to me who have just started building their app, and they want my advice, they want my feedback and stuff, and they're now part of these groups themselves. It's great. It feels like, I imagine how this is the computer industry felt back in the early 70s or the mid 70s or the late 70s, when you could call up the head of Atari or something like that, and it was a lot more not compatibility, you know what I mean, communication, that sort of thing, because it was like a niche. It was still a niche, and now it's grown, obviously not a niche anymore. So I wonder if it's mobile photography will get to that point. I hope not. Anyway, that's all I have for you today. There is a new iPhone, an iPhone 13, which myself, Greg, and Dave Podner reacted to last episode. So go and check that out. If I didn't have a YouTube channel, I wouldn't be getting it. I really couldn't care less. I'm watching the keynote, and I'm just like, I don't want to be watching this keynote anymore. Next time, I'm probably not going to watch, because it's it's the same thing every single year. You could literally like take a keynote, take someone who hasn't watched any of the keynotes, make them watch 2 or 3, and then be like, okay, which year is this? Like, which product came first? Won't be able to tell, because every year it's just like, we're 20% better than last year. Okay, like I'm not expecting world-changing innovation every single year, but like, and I understand why they do it, but from a consumer's point of view, like, I don't want a phone every year. I would much prefer every 2 years or something like that. Because anyway, this is a tangent for another day. I'm sure you've got better things to do. I'm going to end it there before I go off on a tangent. Right. Thank you so much for listening. Take care, and I will catch you in the next one.